everyone, Meet Kevin here with new indications that the $450 per week stimulus check idea is gaining a lot of traction, not only within the Senate, but also within the White House. Today, I'm going to break down two interviews that just happened that lead me to this conclusion. And then, of course, after we talk about these stimulus-related updates, I do want to give you a quick update on what I'm doing with my money right now when it comes to investments, stocks, and real estate. We'll keep that short and sweet towards the end. In the meantime, remember, this video is sponsored by Webull. Deposit $100, get 2 free stocks worth up to $1,400. So first things first, both of these interviews were on The Exchange with Kelly Evans. That's a CNBC program, and she started with Rob Portman. Rob Portman, as we mentioned, is that Republican senator who proposed the $450 back-to-work stimulus check idea. The interesting thing about Rob Portman is he's a Republican senator, and he seems to be well respected amongst other senators, which is good because the more respected a senator is, and the fact that he's a Republican and the fact that he's in the Senate, there are only 51 Senate Republicans, right? So, he's a big deal in that sense because the Republicans are now charged with responding to Democrats' 1,800-page bill. I almost said 800-page bill, but that was like the other proposals. The 1,800-page bill Senate Republicans have to respond to. And Senator Rob Portman is going to be one of those Republicans responding to it. And today on the interview with Kelly Evans, he reiterated that, look, it's a problem and it's not fair that people in his opinion, he said this, okay, that people in the bottom 20% are making double on unemployment than what they would have been making if they were working. That doesn't really encourage or motivate you to go back to work. Now, I personally would argue that, people who are on unemployment right now are probably the ones needing all the help they can get. So I don't know that we can necessarily argue fairness. I don't think the whole coronavirus pandemic was fair to anyone without a net worth. I think this really just helped the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, which is bad and sad. But he starts off with that statistic and reiterating that as much as 60 to 70% of people are making more money with the $600 boost and their unemployment pay than they would be making working. And so this is making it very hard for employers to get people back to work. And so his goal is to make it fair. And he kind of iterates what other people are saying. And when he says what other people are saying, we can kind of read between the lines here and see that he probably means what other senators are responding to him with. And there seems to be a potential suggestion of, maybe instead of $400 or $450 to go back to work, what if we just give a $600 back to work credit? Now, right now, it's still not clear if this would apply to everybody or just people who are working or went on unemployment and then went back, or how broadly this applies. We don't have details on that, but it is a good sign that there seems to be talk about a number. Should it be $200? Should it be $450? Should it be $600? That's a sign that consensus is building and that support for this bonus to go back to work is growing. The problem is the current benefits do end July 31st. And realistically, I don't think any of us expect a bill to get passed until maybe at the earliest, like July 2nd or July 3rd. So this wouldn't provide much of a benefit without an extension. So my guess, just based on congressional timelines, is we might see a back to work credit that they end up providing through the rest of the year. And think about the political ramifications of that. The election is in November. If they give everybody a back to work credit through the rest of the year, you're gonna get way more money going back to work than you would from a stimulus check, especially if they apply it broadly to even, people who had maybe their pay reduced or whatever. And obviously there should be support for people who are out of work because they're retired or disabled. Obviously, I do not want to exclude that group. I just want to make that clear. But think about the political move that could be. That could seriously be an election slam dunk. If support for this is growing in the Senate and it's growing in the White House, they propose it and pass it right before the election. You get paid through the election. People are going to go, dude, I'm going back to work. The economy's opening up again. I got all this extra money coming in for the rest of the year. Honey, Christmas this year is going to be great. I'm voting for Trump again. This could be a very brilliant move by Republicans. Now, I know it's not as simple as $2,000 per month, which the Democrats have proposed, which would have been great if they could get it through. But guess what? Democrats aren't in power right now. So let me show you what the White House is saying about this, especially Larry Kudlow, well, he's the next interview. And I want to break down some other stimulus suggestions that Larry Kudlow is talking about, possibly also having in this next round of stimulus. But first, I do want to mention that Senator Rob Portman ended his interview off by saying, look, here's the thing. It's not just a matter of, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not just a matter of people getting money. He wants to get people back to work because when you go back to work, you, quote, get your health care, retirement, dignity, and self-respect that comes from work. This is an interesting POV. And I mean, look, I like just hanging out at home playing Call of Duty and Halo, but I do see that there are benefits of being at work because you do get your healthcare benefits and retirement benefits. And yeah, obviously at some point we do have to get back to work. We can only eat Reese's peanut butter cups for so long before we start adding on the Rona 10 or 15 or 20. And then we buy a Peloton bike that is way overpriced. You make the Peloton stock go up, which is good for people who own the company like me, hashtag not sponsored. But then we never end up using the bike. So anyway, moving on to what Larry Kudlow said. Jeez, if I stress you out, you better have life insurance, okay? You could do so in the link down below. Before I'm done with this video and what Larry Kudlow proposed, you could have life insurance. Okay, let's get into Larry Kudlow's now. Larry Kudlow was immediately asked about what about this $450 proposal, the back to work credit. And what's fascinating about what Larry Kudlow said is he started with what he said yesterday, which is it's something we're looking very closely at. But he actually went a step further and said this line is big right here, quote, we may go with something like that. I don't want to button it down. I don't want to get ahead of policymakers, but the $600 plus up, everyone acknowledges this is a disincentive. So let's pause for a moment here and look at what he's saying. He's saying, well, yesterday he said, we're looking at it very closely. Yeah, well, you can look at a lot of things all day long and not do anything. But the fact that he said, we may go with something like that, that's very optimistic. May is a sign of maybe like, I would say probably a 50% probability, right? 50 to 60%. I wouldn't say it's likely, which would be like 70 to 85% probable. So May, that's good, especially if he says something like that, something that encourages people to go back to work. I don't know, to me, maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I think this is him doubling down on what he said yesterday. Yesterday, he said, we're looking at it very closely. Said the same thing again today, except added, we may go with something like that. That's the first time we've seen that kind of doubling down on one of these stimulus ideas. We've certainly not heard something like that about stimulus checks. We have heard suggestions that the White House is open to the idea about another round of checks, but this has either been from secondhand information or from Donald Trump saying he's not opposed to more checks to people. But this sort of doubling down by the director of the National Economic Council, Larry Kudlow, who basically hangs out on the White House lawn every day, and when he's not on the White House lawn, it seems to just hang out with Donald Trump. This is pretty good insight. But what else does he say? And what else does he propose? Well, he goes on to say that he wants to, quote, promote work, not obstruct work. And I have to say, I thought that was an interesting line. Okay, I see that. He goes on to, and this is the political filter coming out again, right? We're seeing glimmers of hope. We just want to do what we can to have healthy businesses and a healthy workforce. We think growth is going to be phenomenal at the end of the year. You know, the political jargon, we saw all of that. He did also bring up the labor report this morning, and that was the unemployment claims report. The employment claims report, let's just go ahead and pull it up here and we'll look at it together. This report actually came in my opinion, better than expected. Something that I really want to point out to you here before I tell you what Larry Kudlow suggested might be other benefits that come in the next round of stimulus is I really want you to pay attention to what's happening over here. Look at these little bends right here and here. This is really where you want to see the trajectory of this unemployment claims line really continue to get pushed down. The more it gets pushed down, the better. And we really, in this last little reporting here, we saw another inflection point of that rate trending downwards. Had a little bit of a bad bump here, but that downtrend right here is very, very good. It's something to pay attention to. It's good news. It's not, look, don't get me wrong, it's not good that, 2 million more people filed for unemployment claims. That's not good, right? Look, an adjusted total of 1.914 million filed for claims. That's not good, but it is better that the trend is is going downwards. So I do like to see that declining trend. But let's go back to Larry's suggestions about this, what's going on, or some of the other ideas that they're looking at, because I think they're fascinating. So here we go. Larry Kudlow suggested, let's see here, let's pull this up. Okay, Larry went on to say, this part I didn't like so much. He says, I kind of want to see what happens in the next 4 weeks. As we come into July, we might be very surprised, happily surprised, he said, as the virus flattens. This isn't good because it kind of kicks the can down the road until the first week of July, which is honestly kind of what we were expecting anyway in terms of when a bill would get signed. I don't think anybody's expecting any stimulus in June, which is kind of lame that it takes them so long. And here's that classic move again. Let's just kind of wait and see until the beginning of July. Very frustrating. You think these people should just go without pay and get something done. And when they get something done, then they get paid. You know what? How about you be like a real estate agent? When you close the deal, you get paid. Which, speaking of which, if you want to get into real estate investing or be a real estate agent, make sure to check out my programs. Coupon code does end at the end of the month. All right. Now, Larry Kudlow says, look, here's the thing. He goes into talking about China, how China's going to pay, but let's now focus on what other stimulus he's thinking of. A big thing that he's looking at is encouraging businesses to come back to the United States. So expect some kind of incentives for businesses to localize their production. That's going to be good potentially for companies like Tesla. Apple already kind of produces all over abroad, Taiwan and these other areas in the Asia region. It's going to be a lot harder, I think, to bring an Apple to manufacture here. But for a company like Tesla, who's already planning on building a plant in maybe Nevada or Texas, they might be able to reap some additional benefits from some of these new business stimulus plans they're thinking about for localizing manufacturing. So these stimulus plays could affect some of our local stocks as well. He does then go on to say the next round of stimulus, they're looking at a lot of options. He says rewarding people to go back to work, perhaps. Okay, that reiterates what he said earlier. We've heard about the payroll tax holiday before. He mentioned that before as well. Here's something interesting. Deductions for restaurants, tourism, hospitality, and big one, maybe air travel. Could you imagine deductions for restaurants, tourism, and maybe air travel? Heck, maybe even as far as cruise ships, although big asterisk on cruise ships. That could be a big change to the airline industry. If somebody said, hey, you know what, do you want to drive across country, or you want to drive to Yosemite for 8 hours, or do you want to take the plane for 2 hours? And you know what? Look, the plane ticket's $200, but you now get to write that off on your taxes. So maybe it's really only like $140, depending on your tax situation. That's very, very interesting. He did also reiterate this potential capital gains exclusion for 2020 if you sell assets in 2020 and sort of, I don't know if you would have to reinvest these or what the rules would be, but that really only benefits, I feel like, wealthier people who own stocks in real estate, which all of you watching this video should aspire to own stocks in real estate. And my personal opinion is, if you believe that those things are a scam and the market's efficient and you can't make money in those, I would love to be the first person to tell you that's not true. You need to build your wealth by investing in assets. And that's exactly what I want to touch on now. But first, let's just do a quick little recap here. We've got a lot of optimism around what Senator Portman has said. We've got consensus building, not only in the Senate, but in the White House. So this is the plan that we really want to pay attention to. There are tons of plans out there, but unfortunately, the other ones just aren't getting the kind of attention that this plan is now from the people who matter most. And remember, the people who matter most right now are Republicans in power and Donald Trump. In terms of the, what Larry Kudlow said, these extra benefits seem very interesting. And I think 3 times he reiterated the potential of this sort of back to work bonus being something that they would consider or perhaps actually use. Now, in terms of the stock market, well, today is the complete opposite of what we had yesterday, and that means companies like Carnival, AMC, Cinemark, Whirlpool, Cheesecake Factory, Simon Property Group are all on sale today. In fact, Cinemark is down 10%, Delta Airlines about 2%, Dave & Buster's about 3%. So some opportunities in the travel-related sectors. If you're thinking about buying some stocks, if it makes you nervous, make sure to just pick an index fund, get your life insurance. Tesla's down a little bit, so if you're thinking about buying stocks and you're just waiting for that right day, remember, just buy a little bit today and then a little bit again tomorrow when it's a red day, and then buy a little bit again the next day. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you appreciated this insight, and we'll see you soon.